It's Christmas time, and so that means compilations. Well, it doesn't. That doesn't make sense. But you might have got a DS at Christmas back in like 2007 or something. So here's a video of a few different DS games. Enjoy. You can tell it's the late 2000s as there's Alexandra Burke and Ollie Murs. It's time for a new series, this one of licensed games across the generations from the Spectrum up to this week's format, the Nintendo DS. These will be games licenses that don't fit anywhere else. Your books, the foodstuffs, the toys, the strange celebrity endorsements. And the films. They might not necessarily flop, so they don't qualify for my other series, but it is strange to see a game based on them. This one, Nacho Libre, certainly fits in this category, as will fellow Gerard Hess-directed movie Napoleon Dynamite, which had its own DS game, and I will cover at a later time. Nacho Libre is a collection of stylus-reliant mini-games dotted in between a functional but pretty basic wrestling game. It's something we shall be looking at more in depth in a little while though, as we better have a look at the movie from which it's based first. Nacho Libre was directed by Gerard Hess and written by he and his wife, Jerusha. That's a name, isn't it? It tells the story of Ignacio. If you say it like that, Ignacio, it makes you sound all posh and like you know a foreign language. But he's a Catholic monk, and he works as an orphanage cook, and he is a secret Mexican wrestling fan who fancies himself a bit as a Rey Mysterio with a cream cake habit. This grappling man of God is played with the usual enthusiasm from chubby excitement pot Jack Black. His predilection for suplexing men in their pants is kept a secret as wrestling is forbidden by his church, and his celibate God-fearing lifestyle is further complicated when a beautiful nun arrives at his monastery. This monk is having way too many sinful thoughts and wandering far too far away from the path of God. If you ask me, you didn't. Good. The story is very loosely based on the life of Reverend Sergio Gutierrez Benitez, that was a struggle, who had a 23-year career as a luchador, whilst also directing an orphanage as a Catholic priest. His grappler name was Fray Tormenta, which is, in English, Friar Storm, which is a very wrestler monk name, isn't it? Well done on him for coming up with that name. Nacho Libre the movie, it made $99 million worldwide from a $35 million budget, making it a moderate success. Its reception wasn't overly positive, with it currently standing at a mere 40% on Rotten Tomatoes. Nacho Libre, the game, was released exclusively on the Nintendo DS. It was published by Majesco, a software house well known for its Game Boy Advance efforts, who also published a clutch of underappreciated home efforts like Double Dragon Neon. It was programmed by Budcat Creations, a now defunct studio last owned by Activision, who had a hand in developing a lot of the later Guitar Hero titles and some of the early 2000s John Madden titles for Electronic Arts. Nacho Libre released in November 2006, around the time of the movie's DVD release. DVDs, for any Zoomers who've wondered here by mistake, they were like movies magically trapped on discs. Nacho Libre's presentation is a mixture of Mega CD style low resolution video clips, Mexican folk art style menus, and photo puppetry. It's a style aesthetic that suits the movie's indie budget stylings, and while a little bit quirky, it's an absolutely fine match for this game. Music similarly is drawn from the movie, though the map screen ditty is perhaps looped a bit too swiftly and becomes quite irritating quite soon. But overall, the Mexican guitar is entirely in the spirit of the Lucha Libre proceedings that we are seeing unfolding on our tiny little DS screen. The in-game models are 3D figurines split into sections, with the textures being overlaid 2D photos of the movie's cast. They look a little bit like segmented puppets, which is unusual but works pretty well in terms of allowing the characters to move fluidly during a bout. The controls for this are relatively simple for a wrestling title, but still allow for a large range of moves. There's a button that shifts the player's position from a standard grapple to a headlock to a rear choke, and there's a range of different moves related to all of those positions. There's also moves associated with a felled opponent from the corner turnbuckle. You can take the fight outside the squared circle, which isn't always a ring and follows the plot of the movie in that manner, and you can tag in your partner in some matches. There's a range of kicks and blows, of course, that you can minister as well, and well, it is definitely a wrestling game, a distinctive one, mind, both in its control and its silly moves, which can result in a variety of very heinous injuries, albeit extremely temporary ones, but the puppet style nature of the characters lend themselves to these decapitations and amputations. Is it a good wrestling game? I'm not too sure. There are certainly wrestling games that are a lot worse, but it's not going to be mentioned in the same breath as Fire Pro, WrestleFest, No Mercy, or one of the peak era SmackDown games. It's unbalanced at times, but as a first attempt by Budcat, it isn't too bad. It's a shame they didn't get to follow this up and maybe make a Nacho Libre 2. The story mode, which fairly closely follows that of the movie, has minigames, and as minigames on the DS can be, they are a mixed bag. Success in these, which are optional to progress, will help you in terms of boosting your wrestling stats and range from athletic events like bullfighting, basketball and sprinting, to silly ones like avoiding cows on a 50cc bike, climbing a mountain to eat an eagle's egg, and swatting bees on tag team partner Skeleton Steve's chest, and making a salad out of, yes, a slide puzzle. There are multiplayer options too, and a handful of game modes to play around with in those multiplayer options. Is it worthy of your time? For the game's short duration, just about. I'd say so, yes. It is probably one you won't be coming back to. So, yeah, worth a go, but don't expect to be playing it some months down the line. Nintendo Life reviewed this title a few years after, in 2010. They said that Nacho Libre falls a victim to the same pitfalls as most movie licenses. Too little focus on making a great game due to putting wasted effort into retelling the film's story. It's simply not good enough for them to give you a recommendation. They gave it a 4 out of 10.
Can you bring me my chapstick?
No, Napoleon.
But my lips hurt real bad.
Video games are brilliant escapism. Switch on your PlayStation 5 and within a minute, or 50 including the updates, you can be a Premier League footballer banging in a hat-trick in the World Cup final. You can be an ultra-tough space soldier blowing lumps off various xenomorphic aggressors. Or you could be a supremely confident rough tough trying to survive and make it big on the tough streets of modern America. Whereas I have today decided to play a handheld game about a funny-looking socially awkward outcast with bad hair in a small town. Escapism. Napoleon Dynamite was a 2004 American comedy film charting the eponymous character as he deals with several issues. Napoleon is a very uncool student who is trying to deal with his affection for a popular classmate, his unusual family unit, which includes a llama called Tina, a creepy middle-aged uncle, and his brother, who's a bit of a work-shy and do-nothing with an internet girlfriend. As we meet Napoleon, well, he's just made friends with a Mexican exchange student called Pedro. He's a calm but confident character, and the pair soon plan to install him as class president. You may well remember the Vote for Pedro merchandise t-shirts that became briefly popular in the mid-aughts. Napoleon Dynamite was the creation of husband and wife team Gerard and Jerusha Hess, and was an absolute darling of the indie movie scene when Fox Searchlight Pictures picked it up for distribution following the January 2004 Sundance Festival. Did that mean it did well? You betcha it did, despite its fairly decent but not gobsmacking high audience and critic average score on Rotten Tomatoes. It has become an instant cult classic in both the cinema and when it was released on DVD. It made an astonishing amount of money in the cinema, $46.1 million from an original budget of $400,000, and made, albeit briefly, a star out of Napoleon actor Jon Heder. The dance routine performed to Jamiroquai hit Canned Heat has become one of cinema's most enduring scenes. Not bad for an indie film at all. It did well enough to get a brief animated adaptation in 2012 and probably helped see other small-town indie hits like Juno and Little Miss Sunshine get a green light.
Tina, you fat lard, come get some dinner!
3 years after the movie debuted, Crave Entertainment, together with developers Seven Studios, birthed out a game based on the movie on the Sony PlayStation Portable and the Nintendo DS. And yes, it looks very much like the Nacho Libre game I covered a little while back. Now, despite it being based on a movie by the same writers and director, starring some of the same actors, and the two games being very similar in both their art, their animation style, and indeed the structure of the games aren't related at all. Neither the publisher or developer are the same, and although the movie of Napoleon Dynamite came out first, the game came out a year after Majesco's DS wrestling effort. Napoleon Dynamite is a collection of mini-games, 30 on the PSP version and 25 of the beggars on the DS, loosely based on events from the movie. There are a couple of extra events added to Napoleon's cinematic adventure to give it a bit more length and heft, and certainly more scope for nerdy minigames. In one of the subplots, Tina the llama pegs it as soon as the gate opens, and thus an extra subplot is added for you. The games are mostly locked away with batches of 5 or 6 games set in different locations, such as the Napoleon Dynamite homestead, the school, and the main street near the Rex Kwon Dojo gym. If you get at least a bronze medal by doing well, you can progress to the next location. It's visually very scrapbooky, which evokes a lot of the marketing for the movie, along with, of course, Napoleon's very distinctive sketch art. Here's him drawing a liger.
What are you drawing?
A liger.
What's a liger?
It's my favorite animal. It's like a lion and a tiger.
It is a colourful and quirky way of presenting the action for a movie that, strictly speaking, probably isn't prime fodder for a video game. It works. It also enables a look that remains fairly consistent across an extremely diverse selection of games. Proportionately, it's illogical, but again, in a world viewed through the thick lenses of the very strange male Taylor Swift lookalike, again, it works pretty well indeed. The mini-games are, well, how do we put this? A bit light in complexity. It's a fairly expansive bunch, ranging from a very limited side-scrolling beat-em-up, a track and field style challenge, a low-rent cooking mama section, a few sports games based on things like dodgeball and swing ball, a slew of rhythm games for Napoleon's dance sequences, and some puzzle-based exploits. How do they play? Well, imagine if someone had looked at all the games ranked between 20 and 50 on Newgrounds in, say, 2005 and went, yeah, them, let's take them. So none of the actual really good stuff like Alien Hominid or Dad and Me. No, the lesser stuff, not the terrible stuff. No, just the lesser stuff. It is a collection of slightly above average early noughts flash games wrapped in Napoleon Dynamite paper. This in itself is alright, I guess, but each of the games, well, they slightly outstay their welcome. WarioWare and Bishi Bashi Special show how these packages should work in and out and leave them wanting more in less than a minute, or in some cases less than 5 seconds. This would mean, of course, that Napoleon Dynamite would require even more mini-games in an already inflated set of events from the movie, otherwise it would be severely anemic. As it stands, the mini-games that we have go on for far too long. Some of the mini-games can go on for 5 minutes or more, and they're too light for that, really. Another issue is that the game isn't particularly funny. The strength of the movie, aside from its quirky atmosphere, which this game does have, was its dialogue, and the timing of that dialogue. By snipping little lines from Napoleon, his brother Kip and Pedro, and then just sort of repeating those lines ad nauseum for the characters' successes and failures within a level, completely out of context, well, it's not at all funny, really. Some of the situations, enemies and animations are funny-ish, but they aren't why the movie was funny. Another issue is that some of the levels are either poorly thought out or a bit finicky control-wise, which shows particularly badly without the touchscreen on the PSP version. Yes, the PSP version does have more levels, but the DS touchscreen, I think it gives it an advantage and the games play better for the most part. I think, to be honest, a game more akin to Broken Sword or a LucasArts adventure probably would have been the wise way to go with this difficult license. Unlike the very similar Nacho Libre, it doesn't have that central concept of wrestling. Okay, so the wrestling game in Nacho Libre wasn't on par with, say, I don't know, Fire Pro Wrestling or one of the SmackDown games, but it was strong enough to carry it for the most part. The mini games in this, they're all just separate. They don't really gel as an experience. In the end, Napoleon Dynamite feels a little bit lost and slightly directionless, a bit like Napoleon himself. Maybe it's smarter than I thought. Nah, you'd be better off drawing pictures of ligers in your school book.
Wish you wouldn't look at me like that, Napoleon.
I wish you'd get out of my life and shut up.
IGN, though, found the DS version was pretty fun, saying die-hard fans of the movie will find this game enjoyable, but gamers looking for some bite-sized gaming fun might be surprised by what they find here. They gave it a 7 out of 10 in November 2007. A 1-star review was forthcoming from Games Radar in February 2008, however. They said that if they translated the aura of the film through more creative means in the actual gameplay and story, like they did with the art, Napoleon Dynamite might have been more of a success. As it is, however, they recommended staying far, far away. Oh dear. It's Shaun the Sheep. It's Shaun the Sheep. He even hangs about with those that cannot bleat. Yes, there's one thing that Shaun the Sheep is, and that is very inclusive. Today I'm going to be reviewing his 2 DS games because I genuinely am intrigued about how the claymation wallback would translate to a video game. Plus, it gives me a chance to use all of my terrible farm puns throughout the review. So if you think that these are a load of bullocks, well, I am not going to stop cow. Don't be pig ignorant. You can't duck this. But before we gate to the game, we mustn't forget to look at its inspiration. Sorry, I've changed my mind now. These are bad. Oh, I feel a little bit hoarse after that. Shaun the Sheep had his debut in the third Wallace and Gromit adventure, that being A Close Shave, which came out in 1995 and promptly scooped an Oscar the following year for the creators Aardman Animations. In A Close Shave, Shaun escapes a villainous sheep-rustling robot dog called Preston and joins the titular pair in their efforts to rescue both Shaun's flock and Wallace's love interest, Windalina. Shaun's charming, wordless, goofery demeanour throughout the short made him an instant star, and I certainly remember the mint sauce-fearing farm animal becoming a merchandising juggernaut, with a gutted Shaun becoming a backpack for many a young lady at the college I was attending in the mid-90s. After another fleeting, or should I say fleecing, appearance in a 2002 Crazy Contraptions Wallace and Gromit short, Shaun eventually had enough kudos to get his own series in 2007. There have been 170 episodes of this so far, broadcast across the BBC channels, and latterly a 6th series first appearing on Netflix before returning home to Auntie Beeb. It's been sold to over 180 countries worldwide, has had a pair of Christmas specials, a spin-off for younger children in Timmy Time, and a pair of feature films. Wallace and Gromit only got one feature film. That ovine has certainly left you in the dirt, boys. The show itself is great, a slapstick tale of life on a farm, completely wordless, save for Vic Reeves belting out the theme tune. Despite having no dialogue, each of these plasticine critters have their own defined personas. The farmer is an aloof buffoon, oblivious to much of what is going on his yard. The pigs are a crew of vindictive bullies, Mower Mouth is a hyped-up angry goat, and Bits of the dog is an overly officious drill sergeant. But ultimately, he has a good sense of right and wrong. Although, to be honest, his snout being separate from his mouth freaks me out a little bit. But that's either genetics or a design choice by Urban Animations, so it's not really his fault. There's the good boy. The sheep are less defined, but then that's the joke, they're sheep. Most of the adventures see the smart leader of the flock, Shaun, trying to round up his fleecy brethren for the overwhelmed Bitzer as they wander off and get themselves in all kinds of trouble. So, a brilliant show for the entire family, and one that has had a number of video games, from a slew of Android and iOS titles to a Switch game based on the second movie Farmageddon. Farmageddon, a movie which my friend once got wrong and called Sheep Impact, which is sort of funny when you think about it. There were even a series of short films designed entirely around the 3DS. Aardman designed them to be downloaded and watched on the 3DS, taking advantage of that system's 3D capability, so you could finally see the contours of Shaun's furry rump, if you're down with that, you big deviant. But today we're not talking about the 3DS, we're talking about the DS, the precursor to that machine, and indeed its pair of Shaun the Sheep games released by D3 Productions, that were released in October of 2008 and 2009 respectively. They were both developed by the now sadly defunct Art Company Limited, a developer that also developed games based on children's licenses like Rugrats, Scooby-Doo and Astro Boy. Despite being made in Japan, the first game only released in the West, with the second only coming out in Europe. The first game, simply called Shaun the Sheep, has a rather familiar premise. The sheep have gotten loose once again, and so Shaun must round up his errant flock before the farmer gets back from town. I've no idea what he'll do once he gets back. Maybe he'd beat the dog. That's dark. This sheep retrieval is achieved by wandering around a 3D interpretation of Mossy Bottom Farm, solving puzzles, looking for useful items in the thickets, and competing in a smattering of mini-games, all of which can be later accessed individually from the main menu. The game area isn't huge, you're restricted to the various barns, coops, and fields surrounding the farmstead, but there's recognisable details for fans of the show, like the trash heap and the nearby circus tent. The sheep are hidden in a variety of places like trees and bushes, but some require a bit more work, such as finding the correct key or rescuing them via partaking in a minigame. In this one, Timmy is in a spot of bother in the circus tent, and it's up to Shaun to catch him. Once rescued, sheep will assist Shaun in a variety of ways. Big Shirley's mass will soon clear porcine perils, for instance, and Bitzer is just a stylus tap away from getting rid of those pesky porkers and getting them back in line. It's a stripped-down, kid-friendly point-and-click that lets you use the D-pad as well as the stylus if you're that way inclined. Objects will feature interactive symbols if you're close enough to them, and it's generally pretty straightforward where you have to go next. Stars on the upper screen will denote the next location on the map. Each area is pretty small, so if you're either very young or thicker than a post-constipation cowpat, you won't be stuck for too long, unlike that cowpat. As soon as you locate a new sheep, something will trigger another part of the farm, making it accessible. As I said previously, the game map is pretty small, which means the game is also pretty short. Don't expect an ovine epic here. You can finish it in under 2 hours comfortably, but in a way that's a good thing. The source material is comprised of small, short 7-minute episodes after all, for those with a short body and an attention span to match. The mini-games in Shaun the Sheep are pretty much how you'd expect them to be, very DS-y. They are short, sometimes easy, sometimes frustrating, pastiches of classic games that require deft use of the stylus and occasionally the mic. They may offer a certain amount of replay value once they become accessible on the main screen, but I doubt it, they're not that good. The most successful thing that Shaun the Sheep does though, and it is by no means a guarantee with these types of games, is it successfully captures the mood, the feel and the comedy of the animation on which it is based. From the cutscenes to how its menagerie of characters react and interact, it's pretty much spot on. Don't expect Shaun the Sheep's first adventure though to blow your wool off. It is though a perfectly serviceable waste of an hour or so, particularly for a little one. IGN gave it a 6.5 and said that Shaun the Sheep is a fun little point-and-click adventure that is fun while it lasts, when they gave it the review treatment back in October 2008. Nintendo Power, though, they didn't much care for it. To them it deserved no more than a 40%, and they said that the unlockable mini-games were not enough to make the game any more entertaining than counting sheep. The second title, Shaun the Sheep Off His Head, came out just a year later, as previously mentioned, exclusively for us here in that there the Europe. This title sees yet another disaster for the farmer. He has just purchased a hairpiece to conceal his balding pate, no doubt with an eye on charming the rural lasses back to his stone-clad abode. However, an errant gust of wind sullies that potential lusty plan, and so he corrals his faithful dog Bitzer to retrieve it. Bitzer sensibly delegates the responsibility to a much smarter quadruped, Shaun, who then sets out on an adventure which forms this game's quest. The first thing you'll notice is that there are a lot of assets reused in the central hub from the first game. The field and chicken coop are very much identical, as are the sprites of the beasts that make up this Aardman animated world. As soon as you leave the first area though, you'll be in a different presentation of the farm and its familiar surroundings. In this game, the surrounding area of Mossy Bottom and its agricultural business are presented in segmented stages. These stages are missions as Shaun desperately tries to catch up with various creatures like ducks, moles and Pidsley the cat, who will all have possession of the syrup at different times, only to end up getting constantly thwarted. You can return to the central field whenever you like, and you may have to, as unlike the previous game, you now have energy hearts. These can be depleted by pigs, frogs, sprinklers, and bees.
What is that? What is it? Oh, no, not the bees! Not the bees! Ah!
You can replenish this health bar by feeding Shaun apples which can be purchased by returning the hen's children, which act as currency. How many chicks have you got, lady? And does this reflect poorly on the farmer? He's clearly not connecting enough of these eggs before they hatch. The game is still largely puzzle-based, but it's more a fetch quest-based affair now, with later levels requiring you to go across multiple different stages to get various objects, and all the killer earthworms and robot sheepdogs that this entails. There's a slight flaw that sometimes it's tempting, once you've acquired a part, to simply just put your mutton chops in harm's way. A death means you'll just be returned to the sheep field without any recrimination. I'm glad you can mind, because there's nothing too exciting about returning to these stages. Much like most of rural England, once you've seen one bush-surrounded field, you've seen them all. The game isn't very diverse, apart from a brief sojourn down into an underground mole burrow. There's some very brief and very frustrating stealth elements in the game at certain points, but they're just not very good. You have to hide behind particular brushes in order to get your pursuer to move on. If you're seen, you have to redo it again. The mini-games in this game are less reliant on the stylus or the mic than the previous Shaun game, and so are a great deal less creative. Special mention though to the Pidsley the Cat John Woo cover shooter food fight, as that bit is genuinely excellent. Overall, it's different enough from the first Shaun the Sheep game, so it's worth a look, but it's clearly a little bit less creative and a touch more rushed than its predecessor. Definitely the weaker of the two. If you want to play one, play the first one. You may well find that playing both is too big a price to pay. I said I'd stop with the puns, didn't I? Due to the European-only release, reviews are a little bit thin on the ground for this one, with the only review I could find from the time coming from that well-known gaming periodical, the Lancashire Telegraph, on the 13th of November 2009. They gave it a 4 out of 5 and said for Aardman fans, it's an exciting prospect to dive into episodes of Shaun the Sheep and recreate the fun and unique silent movie humour. Will I ever mention the Lancashire Telegraph again? Nintendo had a pretty major reinvention in the second half of the 2000s, from a marketing point of view at least. The previous two home consoles, the Nintendo 64 and the GameCube, were firmly playing second or third fiddle to Sony and latterly Microsoft. Not only that, but those PlayStation swines were threatening to take away the long-held handheld console market leadership with their flashy PSP console. Not even the games of the most famous plumber in all of Christendom and their exclusivity to the Nintendo consoles could make them king once again. So while they had competed with Sega on an even playing field in the previous decade, both technologically and to the same people they were marketing at, i.e. us lynx stinking smelly spotty oiks like myself, post-millennium Nintendo was lagging like a house fitter with no small amount of water pipe insulation ahead of him. So Nintendo recognised that oiks who had grown up on the NES, the Super Nintendo and Game Boys were now dabbling with PlayStations and Xboxes. What was it to do? Well, they targeted literally everyone else, well, except pets and newborns. Later in the decade, your nan was putting her back out, throwing imaginary bowling balls in her care home using the magic of the Wii. But before that, she was whipping out the DS XL in the false hope that Dr. Kawashima was going to stave off the demon that was onset dementia. Spoilers, it probably didn't. And while Mario and his karting side hobby were very popular, it's doubtful that the majority of both grannies and middle-aged Karens were too bothered about saving the Mushroom Kingdom from Bowser or power sliding with him around Rainbow Road. So those people who were using the Dr. Kawashima and other brain training software as a form of interactive self-help may have found themselves at a loose end after they'd made their brain into some sort of gross, slimy, grey Arnold Schwarzenegger. It is those people that Ubisoft and Deep Silver were marketing towards with today's titles: Health Coach Stop Smoking with Alan Carr and Russell Grant's Astrology. They weren't the only ones, of course. You could learn how to lose weight, learn how to speak in a foreign tongue, fight, and even teach a dog to behave. And all of those were under the same My Coach banner as the Stop Smoking with Alan Carr video game. And no, it's not that Alan Carr. Let's just get that out of the way first. Everyone is going to say this. Everyone who saw the box said this. No, it's not Alan Carr the comedian. All right, that's dealt with. Thou shalt not bear witness to a fake Alan Carr. Now this is Alan Carr, the authority on giving up the death sticks that fill the lung with the tar. Carr gave up cigarettes without even trying, and then wrote this book about it to make you feel bad that you've been having a cheeky one in the pub, even though you've told the missus that you've definitely given up. You sap, you weak-minded boob. He didn't even need to attack everyone else's olfactory senses with his bloody candy floss-smelling vape, or use those nicotine patches. This is a real man, Alan Carr. Alan's video game takes lessons from his patented Easy Way method, which explains that smoking is mostly psychological and the most significant factor in addiction to cigarettes. It came out 2 years after Alan died of lung cancer in 2006, which might not seem like the greatest endorsement of his work, but it's worth bearing in mind that Carr had quit 25 years before after doing puff damage to himself, incremental little slashes of damage to his health bar 30 years before. He needed this on his 1971 Nintendo DS, and he'd still be with us. Probably he was in his 70s when he died. You start by putting in your name, which is harder than it looks. I had real difficulty drawing a recognisable A using the stylus. It was extremely frustrating, I can tell you that. I could have done with a 20-pack of Rothmans to get me through this. You then have to confess how bad your habit is, and as a non-smoker, I found this game to be very discriminatory against my addiction to no cigarettes at all, as it makes you select at least one every day. I don't think Ubisoft are taking my addiction seriously enough, frankly. Anyway, please excuse me while I put in the name of my best friend who doesn't smoke. You then have to select a tutor from a variety of sympathetic-looking faces with middle-aged haircuts who will help you through your journey from dirty ashtray face to clean air king. You'll go through several lessons with your tutor, aided by this stick fella and a rather grumpy-looking sentient cigarette. It is pretty dry, in all honesty, this title, like you've spent 30 quid on the sort of PowerPoint presentation that your office job makes you sit through at 9 AM. Pass me the duty freeze, I'm struggling here. It's important to realise that this isn't supposed to be fun. It's supposed to get you to realise that you don't need to huff nicotine in order to feel relaxed. This title is supposed to change your mindset. But there are games still that you can replay once you've completed the lesson associated with them. Please don't expect Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom level stuff. They're pretty much illustrative and about as playable and returnable to as a half-smoked pack of Marlboro that's been found in a toilet bowl. As soon as you've done the lessons, you'll be able to sprint upstairs without wheezing as you'd have given up cigarettes. And that won't take too long at all. You see, you've got at most 2 hours of content here, which sounds significantly less than the 194 pages of Carr's 1985 book. Or maybe it isn't, depending on how quickly you can read. I'm a simpleton, so it would take me several months. I can confirm, though, it definitely worked on me, as I haven't smoked since I played it. Pocket Gamer gave it 3 stars in 2009. They said that the mini-games aren't very enthralling, and the books are much more in-depth, but if you're not much of a reader, it's worth a go. Only a mystic could have predicted that score, so maybe we should have asked roly-poly soothsayer Russell Grant. Russell, 72, has been a televisual fixture since 1979, rising to prominence nationwide with his appearances on both ITV and BBC's breakfast programmes for the duration of the 1980s. His jovial personality hasn't just been restricted to only the Zodiac, however, with Russell trying his hand at talk shows and general presenting, and then seeing a career renaissance thanks to the post-millennial reality television boom that refuses to burst like the pustule it is. He has been in most of the shows you can mention. Okay, not Love Island. Smart ass. Russell Grant's Astrology, known elsewhere as Astrology DS, the stars in your hands, is your personal guide to the horoscope. It will give you a variety of readings based on the date, time and your place of birth. For wannabe Mystic Megs, before she died, there's even an assistive lesson on how you too can read the stars. Imagine predicting your mum's days by the predicted orbit of celestial objects. Why, you'll be the talk of the bus ride she takes to go and get her pension, so you will. A master of astromancy, like Doctor Strange without the fights against Thanos, Dormammu and the Scarlet Witch. Sounds pretty good, doesn't it? Well, cards on the table, tarot cards at that. It's fair to say I have some doubts. Just me, I can't see personally how Proxima Centauri, a small low-mass star 4.24 light years away from us, how the movement of that celestial object can affect the life of a 32-year-old receptionist reading the column next to the Hagar the Horrible cartoon. Call me a cynic, that's fine, but I just don't think that star moving through space, I don't know how that's affecting how she's going to try and pull Darren at the pub that night. Just me. Personally, I don't think those two things are connected. But let's test this out. Prove me wrong, Russell Grant's astrology game. I've got 3 subjects here to study, so let's begin that. It's only fair that our first subject should be Russell himself, a man perhaps at the tail end of his career, who has been with his manager, who's also his partner, Doug Beaumont, since 1972. According to this game, he will overcome professional misfortune with bravery and intuition. Now, if we were playing the read into whatever makes it work game that most astrology fans do, we could be looking at Russell's recent recovery from surgery related to a brain tumour. However, it does explicitly say professional, so the only thing we can assume is that his recent pet psychic business isn't working out too well. Moving on to love, well, his mysterious charm will see him get what he needs from the opposite sex. Poor old Dougie. He's stuck with him through thick and thin. All his health issues, the dips in his career, the time that he lost on Strictly. And he's gone and left him. He's moved his love away from Uranus and Venus to put his love into Hanny's Vorpweep. He definitely seems to have discovered his heterosexual tendencies very late into his life. Next up, and I thought I'd go for famous philanthropist and TV presenter who I haven't heard from in a while, Sir Jimmy Savile. Now, I don't read the papers or watch a lot of the news, and I'm just sort of wondering where this guy's been. I saw someone call him a monster on social media the other year, and I thought, well, that's a bit unfair. He can't help looking a little bit weird. He was always so good with those children on his television shows as well. Anyway, the first bit seems very on point. Old Jimmy certainly loves his jewellery and his shell suits. So that information on screen, I'd say that's pretty fair, and I'm definitely starting to believe now. In love, Sir Savile has deep, wide-ranging feelings, apparently. However, he should not keep driving himself ever onwards and should decide on a partner with whom to share the joys of love. Well, he's never got married, has he? This is good advice. You know what? He's very kind-hearted and spends a lot of his free time at those children's hospitals, but he's never found enough time to meet someone else. Come on, Jimmy. Finally, we have this pack of Red Leicester cheese. I don't know when the cow launched it from its teat, so I have no idea on the date of its birth, but I did buy this product a week past its sell-by date. Ah well, I predict the shits in my future, and I'm not even Russell Grant. I'll use its expiry as its date of birth, and I'm interested to see what kind of career and love life this Red Leicester cheese will have. After all, surely the planets moving about don't just affect humans, but also the lives and loves of chinchillas, houseplants, slugs, and the mould that no doubt is growing on this particular cheese. To think that mankind only is affected by these great celestial objects circling each other is a bit arrogant after all, isn't it? We're just monkeys with iPhones. Nothing special. The Red Leicester packet in my fridge apparently needs to let itself go and look after itself properly. It needs to start flirting, which is a bit weird considering it's 2 weeks old, and cheese. And there are great adventures ahead of it. Melting into bread, probably. A grand adventure indeed. And probably the bit where it makes me really ill and exits my arse. So there we have it. I've given you the evidence. You can make your own theses up about it if you will. But now you're a master of the mystic arts, you can use your skills in some of the contained games. Yes, it's not just a tool for teaching you the stars and how to use the stars, but you also can play these incredible games of Sudoku, a matching card game, and a sliding puzzle. Yay, everyone's favourite, a sliding puzzle. There wasn't many of these on the DS, was there? But if you're a fan of bunkum about the moon affecting your career, maybe you can invest some time into it. I don't know. It's cheaply produced shelf filler. I think it's pretty awful, but then I think Astrology's awful. There's no reviews from the time that I can find, and who could have predicted that? Yes. March 2024, Sting, no, not Gordon Sumner, idiot, will wrestle the last match of a long 39-year career. He and his Daredevil protege Darby Allin will take on the Young Bucks in a tag team match at AEW Revolution, and that curtain will sure as heck come down on this most legendary of careers. Being a poor kid with ankle swinger trousers whose hair was cut by his mum, I didn't get the luxury that was Sky, so my love of American wrestling mainly came from WCW, courtesy of ITV, with Sting being the most prominent figure there. I had to stay up late, bloody late, as it was on in the early hours of the morning on ITV. My favourite wrestler was the Marvel copyright agitating Arachnaman. I've even got a t-shirt of that. But my second favourite was Sting. The iconic figure, real name Steve Borden, has wrestled for all the major US companies from UWF, CWA and NWA, with his biggest success coming in the WCW and feuds with iconic figures like Ric Flair, Vader, Hollywood Hogan, Lex Luger and Steve Austin. A decade after WCW's demise, the iconic figure turned up on chief rivals WWF. But it wasn't really good for either party, and he later signed on to AEW for his final run as a wrestler. What was Sting doing for that missing decade though? Kicking his heels on the beach in his surfer persona? Hanging out with his old buddy RoboCop? Sitting in arena rafters looking like Brandon Lee? No sir, he was an active competitor and champion with another wrestling company. Look, there he is, in this here game. Hello Sting, give us a wave. That wrestling company was Total Non-Stop Action Wrestling, or TNA for short. Yes, that acronym means something else, and yes, it's intentional. That's Vince Russo. So, as a way of saying happy retirement to one of my childhood heroes, rather than give him a carriage clock, I'll make him a video he will never see about the second most successful period of his career related to a game he will never play. It's the lack of thought that counts. TNA Wrestling then. It was a good time to enter the market, as it was at a time when the WWF had finally won the Battle of the Monday Night Wars, a real bitter life's feud between itself and the WCW. The latter closed its doors at the start of the century, and so a gap in the market appeared for a company to be an alternative to that main corporation. There were several other smaller companies headed by Ring of Honor, but none had the funding or experience to be a serious contender to the WWE. Then TNA appeared in 2002, led by known wrestling bookers Jerry Jarrett, Jeff Jarrett, Bob Ryder, and oops, here he is, Vince Russo. Rather than compete with the WWE, it operated in a different way. The WWE had TV shows. TNA was going to raise money by running a weekly pay-per-view model. The innovative concept worked quite well, and they were soon on cable television with a financial backer, that being Panda Energy. It was when the second show, Impact, started in 2004 that TNA started to make a name for itself by being a true alternative to the WWE. The distinction is important here. At no point has TNA been a direct competitor to the biggest name in wrestling, but it was an alternative. The ring gained an extra 2 sides, and young stars like AJ Styles, Bobby Roode and Samoa Joe were exciting talent, probably more talented than any young competitor on the other channel at the time. They were given ample support by industry veterans in various in-ring and out-of-ring roles like Jeff Jarrett, Dusty and Dustin Rhodes, Jeff Hardy, Dutch Mantell and Kevin Nash. Later on, high-profile figures, denied by WCW's demise of options of American employment, finally had a different option that could give them a regular wage and television exposure. The Dudley Boys, Kurt Angle, Christian Cage and Scott Steiner were some of the early grapplers to switch over to TNA. It did pretty well until it tried to be a competitor to WWE and hired Hulk Hogan and former WCW President Eric Bischoff. TNA overreached. The homegrown younger stars were marginalised, and the stars of the previous decade like Kevin Nash, Ric Flair and Scott Steiner started to take more and more of the spotlight and indeed the TV time. When Hogan and Bischoff left in 2013, they left the company in a much worse state than when they got there. It's struggled along ever since. It is still about doing much better than it has done in ages, and has recently forged better relations with the WWE, giving it more exposure and allowing talent to compete in the Women's Royal Rumble in 2024. It is now the third company in American wrestling, given the rise of the upstart AEW company, and you know what? It's good there. No expectations, just coasting along with decent crowds and an ardent fan base. The stars of the early days have gone on to bigger things and championships with AEW and WWE, and most of the active participants in this game are still employed somewhere. TNA Cross the Line hit US store shelves in 2010 for the Sony PSP and the Nintendo DS, but it wasn't the first game to appear bearing that TNA license. TNA Impact came out on the home formats on the PlayStation 2 and 3, the Nintendo Wii and the Xbox 360, published and developed by Midway. The game was a fairly middling grapple game that received fairly average reviews across the gaming press. Not terrible, and a good starting point for further home console entries never came. Still, it's a fascinating game for one reason: the character Suicide. He's the luchador main character in the game's story mode, who you can customise in an effort to win the championship. What's amazing is that he actually turned up on TV as an on-screen talent after the game's release, and was around for some time, winning the X Division Championship. Yes, indeed. Underneath that presumably very sweaty garb, the game's lead character competed in TNA, played by Frankie Kazarian, Chris Daniels and TJ Perkins. For that fact alone, a fact that would probably make old-school wrestling purist Jim Cornette fill his pants in rage, TNA Impact is a fascinating footnote in wrestling game history. And actually, this Suicide storyline is ported over to the PSP version, but more on that in a bit. Back to TNA Cross the Line, which was released in the summer of 2010. The PSP version is very similar to the PS2 version of the original title, whereas the DS version had a completely different engine to the game from its big brother. It was developed by Double Tap Studios, a company with very few titles, though one of them is the 40th anniversary remake of Oregon Trail. Ooh. It was published for the DS by South Peak Studios, who I may return to at some stage, as they did a game based on the middle-class Dennis the Menace, that is, Horrid Henry. I hate Horrid Henry. They also published a couple of right indie darlings in 3D Dot, Heroes and Trine, so they can't be all bad, eh? There are a number of options which you'd expect in any wrestling game worth its salt, as well as exhibition mode and the myriad match types that spawn off of that. You've got Victory Road, which is a Mortal Kombat style competition. No, don't worry, Rhino doesn't get his bowel exposed to the sunlight, courtesy of Chris Sabin, I mean in its structure. Look at it, it's a big imposing tower full of growly man faces. Then you've got the story mode, which is where the games diverge. The PSP gets a tweaked version of the previously mentioned Suicide character storyline, which sees the fella attempt to rise through the ranks when he goes into business for himself and wins when he was supposed to lose. Wait, are they addressing wrestling as fake here? No, this is all played very straight. He gets beaten up and left for dead, and then sets out on a path of revenge against the nefarious Jeff Jarrett. Damn you, Jeff Jarrett, you slapnut son of a badger penetrator. In the big boy PS3 and Xbox 360 version, this beatdown starts the story, which takes the character to create a character screen because he gets plastic surgery. In this, just like the PS2 and Wii versions, limitations mean there is no creator character, so Suicide just looks the same barring a switch in colours. It's a bit, that will do. The DS version sounds more exciting. You can pick whatever wrestler you like in the game, and each has their own story. Brilliant until you play it and realise each of these stories is extremely linear, and worse, in text, with no motion to the on-screen images, and no branching storyline. You just get a lame threat from someone, and then you have a match against one of them or their mates. It is very, very lazy. The DS game also gets shortchanged when it comes to the roster. You get 18 grapplers, yes. You get 2 exclusive characters, though, one of which is the most famous man in the industry, Hulk Hogan. Is he still regarded as that, though? The Rock is surely more famous now, Cena is getting up there, Batista is actually a decent actor. I don't think Hulk Hogan is anymore, is he? The other person is Curryman, who, well, Chris Daniels in a comedy gimmick. The PSP has all 16 of those other characters and 37, yes, that's 37 extra wrestlers. Yeah, most of them are generic made-up characters that are unlocked during the Suicide storyline as he rises to the big leagues, although Afro Thunder from Ready to Rumble is a nice nostalgic touch. But boy oh boy, the DS owners are shortchanged, especially given that the graphical representations on the DS game are a little off. Everyone has the same Leith physique, so while Mick Foley and Abyss look like they're in the shape of their life, but they've really shortchanged my boy Samoa Joe. He's been left skinny fat and loses his aura somewhat. Match-wise, you've got the usual wrestling game fare: tag team, multi-man matches, weapons, falls count anywhere, though that anywhere is just outside the ring. There won't be any SmackDown 2-style punch-ups in the locker room or the car park, sadly. Unique to TNA, though, is the Ultimate X match, where a big gold X is positioned above the ring, and you have to weaken your opponent and then shimmy across the rope to get to the X before he can stop you. It is a pretty unique gimmick match, and it's alright fun, I suppose. No Royal Rumble mode, though, because that's owned by the big boy company across the road, and nothing compares to a good Rumble in a video game with wrestling. Gameplay-wise, and both versions make an attempt to recreate the SmackDown game's control setup with their own twists on it. The DS version does incorporate touchscreen controls, but does it in a way better than the attempts made by the WWE games from 2008 and 2009. They only come into play during submissions, pin attempts and finishing moves. They're fine. The button lag and collision detection, not so much. It can be a bit painful at times. You'll be cussing it up like James Storm. The PSP version apes the TNA Impact system, and it adopts its pluses and minuses. There's no issue with the collision detection in this one, and the wrestling itself is one that encourages you to counter-attack moves. The countering is tricky to pull off for beginners, so be warned, the early going in the PSP game will be tough. In both games, the L trigger acts as a strong attack modifier, which broadens the range of moves, but it's a bit thin on moves when compared to other wrestling games. There is a genus of a very good wrestling game here, definitely something to build on. And as I mentioned before, it is such a shame that TNA 2 didn't appear. Another issue in both games, and I'm blaming this on the six-sided ring, is how hard it is to line up a running attack. You'll be flopping about like a short-placed halibut, trying to drop-kick your adversary. However, judging this game in isolation without a fantasy sequel that never came, it is a wrestling game with an unfinished feeling to its controls, and just like the company it's based on, it's a bit third rank. Reviews at the time were as middling as the home console reviews 2 years earlier. Games Radar said of the PSP version in June 2010 that too few moves means that the scope for variation is almost non-existent. There are a few slick context-sensitive moves and a good reversal system, but aside from that it's punch, 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 and then a choice of 2 slams until you lose or your tears short-circuit your PSP. They gave it a 2 out of 5. GameSpot in August 2010 also reviewed the PSP version, sorry DS owners, I've not got anything for you, and said Cross the Line isn't enjoyable enough during the moments when everything gels and comes together, but far too frequently the cumbersome and stiff controls get in the way. This port of a now 2-year-old game could have been a good opportunity to tighten up some of the gameplay issues from the console release. Instead, it's largely untouched, making it a weak contender among other portable wrestling games. So yes, sorry Sting, it's been a bit of a dour tribute to your legacy. Perhaps I should have reviewed Fight Forever or WWE 2K19, or just got you a carriage clock. Likes. Daytime television is quite unique, isn't it? An 8-hour chunk of the schedule that is dedicated to keeping the unemployed, the retired, and the parents of the very young entertained. It is the home of angry opinions via Jeremy Vine and the Harridans of Loose Virtue, the home of micro-budgeted dramas both British and Antipodean, the home of wheeler-dealer men forged from teak hawking old tat to other flamboyant old boys with unique hair and condiment-coloured trousers. And it's all completely disposable rubbish. But homely rubbish. It is as essential to any stricken whelp as a duvet on the settee, a cup of soup and a Lucozade. Without daytime TV, it's possible that sick people may never recover and return to work. It is that important. No doubt the highlight of this tawdry entertainment is unquestionably the quiz show. From chain letters to Going for Gold, from Countdown to Blockbusters, from The Weakest Link to Pointless, all the way through to stuff like Tipping Point and The Chase that is shown on television today. The quiz show is the king of daytime entertainment. With their shiny black floors, their distinctly illuminated sets, their genial known quantity host, and their low monetary prize, combined with, and this is important, a cut and paste production value that doesn't require much work, these shows are nothing less than completely riveting. But there were some shows that couldn't really be described as quiz shows, even though they followed much the same format as I've just described. 2 of them that I'm thinking of right now both had games on the Nintendo DS, Deal or No Deal, and the game we're going to cover today, Goldenballs. The reason you can't describe Goldenballs or Deal or No Deal as quiz shows is because, well, there's no quiz. They don't feature any questions. All the other elements are present, but no one has put any questions in Jasper Carrot's hands. Oh, must have forgotten, silly people. Goldenballs was an ITV series that ran from June 2007 to December 2009 over the course of 6 series and 288 episodes. And it did very well initially, winning the 5 PM ratings battle against its television competition, including the then institution of Anne Robinson's The Weakest Link. Despite its cheap format and relative success on UK screens, it wasn't one, surprisingly, that translated across the world like The Weakest Link or Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, as there's only one other version that I can find, and that was in Argentina. As previously mentioned, it was presented by brummy funny man Jasper Carrot. Jasper had been a regular feature on television throughout the 1980s and 1990s with shows like Carrot's Commercial Breakdown, Canned Carrot, Carrot Confidential, as well as sitcoms like The Detectives and the Daily Express baiting All About Me. Jasper is very comfortable in his role of host, always friendly and calm in tense situations where contestants are staring daggers so sharply into each other that they'd be well advised to have a medical team on standby to cope with the puncture wounds. But why would this animosity exist? Well, in place of questions, the game is about trust and deception. 4 players are dealt shiny spheres worth different amounts of money, which range from £10 all the way up to £75,000. Also in the mix are balls marked with one chilling word: killer. Oh. Of the 4 balls each player is given, 2 are shown to all present, whereas the other 2 are hidden away, with only the contestant able to view them. The idea is that the players must eliminate the participants they believe have killers and low-value money, thus keeping the big money in the game, with a vote occurring to nominate the patsy who'll be leaving the show with their terrible balls. Each of the contestants will be given the opportunity to state what's on their hidden balls, and those who have balls as poor as the quality of Lance Armstrong's discarded testicle will try and chin spin and confuzzle their contemporaries to save their rotten hides. Those who are eliminated take their balls with them, probably not home, though if I was on the show, I'd pocket it. My honesty is a reason why I wouldn't be a very good contestant on Goldenballs, but my thievery is why I shouldn't be allowed in society at all. I'm a complex individual, so it's entirely possible that a scumbag has deceived their way through the round with 2 or 3 killer balls. Then they get kept in the game along with their probably low tier money. All the balls still active get put back in that posh looking Goliath of a lottery machine, with more balls added, some killer, some money based. Once we're down to 2 people, the remaining players go to a random game of chance where they choose which balls to keep and which balls to bin. Once these are whittled down to 5 balls, any killer balls that are unveiled will divide the total by 10. So if you have £10,000 in winnings, that is reduced down to 1,000. Another would reduce that amount down to 100. Another would reduce the amount down to £10. Killer indeed. Then comes the big moment of tension. This is what it's all been building up to. Of whatever's left, that is the final cash prize. Jasper hands each player 2 more balls, split and steal. If both players pick split, then the prize is split and shared. But if one player chooses steal, then that player takes home the total amount, the entire pot. That would then leave the remaining player with nothing but betrayal and hate in their heart. In the show, it's easy to see why it's so compulsive to view. It's the magic of human psychology, of joy, of disappointment, of truth versus honesty. Watch this.
Stephen, I just hope they weren't puppy dog tears and they were real tears and you were genuinely going to say everyone who knew me would just be disgusted if I stole.
I am going to split. I swear down to you.
Choose either the split or the steel ball now.
We're going on with 50 grand each. I promise you that.
Split or steel? Congratulations, Sarah, you have just won one. Stephen, I'm so sorry. Commiserations, you've lost.
What a bitch.
Gripping television, I'm sure you'll agree, especially for something pre-evening news. Very entertaining. The stakes are high. The humanity is either going to warm your heart or callous your soul. So, as you've seen from the gameplay I've been showing, all of these rounds are present in Goldenballs, the video game. Good. Developers, Slam Productions, who are also known for working on a few similar era Who Wants to Be a Millionaire and Family Fortunes games, well, they sure have completed their little tick list given to them by publishers Mindscape in terms of things to include. Yep, that's in there. It's all in there. And they've presented them using creepy models of Jasper, who voices his character, and the contestants. who are all given career-based looks and appear to have brought their work uniform with them to the television show. It's a strange-looking aesthetic choice, but it's no different from the buzz games on PlayStation 2 or 3, is it really? You do get footage of the machine working and of the set, but boy is it presented in incredibly grainy, compressed footage. It looks terrible, to be honest, and fares obviously a bit better on the Wii, which is the exact same game as this. But for all these aesthetic choices, they are what they are, and they're not really a massive issue when you compare it to the real problem about the Goldenballs video game. You see, this game functions in exactly the way it's supposed to. The issue is, there's nothing more to it than that. There are no extra options, no extra mini-games. There is a multiplayer mode for 2 players, but that doesn't address a rather glaring issue about this game. There is no game at all. That clip from the show, that shows why the television show was so compulsive. It shows why it was popular for a couple of years there. The entertainment, you see, came from the people. How convincing they were, how manipulative they were. In Goldenballs, the video game, you get 4 options when the lie comes up. You know, the actual gameplay part of the game. You get truth and 3 bluff options. But you don't even get to choose or vet what you say. You just pick one of the lies and the game goes on. Then you get a sort of short response from the other 3. And these are completely random. Sometimes they don't even correspond with the balls that the character has in front of them. They start apologising for having a really good hand. So maybe that my argument that the functionality of the game was okay, maybe that's not true either. But yeah, the main issue of the game is that as a concept, with no adding of any quiz element or a separate section of the game that does something a bit jazzy with the format, you know, like ask quiz questions or has some sort of puzzle element to it or something that involves rolling the balls in a particular way, you're left with the most shallow, artless husk of coding I've ever seen described as a video game. It's the worst thing that I think I've ever seen committed to a DS cartridge. And I've covered the How to Stop Smoking cartridge and the Russell Grant game. Goldenballs, the video game, is as thin as a 2010 era Tesco carrier bag or the wing of a dragonfly. It is as pointless as a lump of blue tack, a fallen trifle, or Alexander Armstrong asking you to name African countries. Always go for Central African Republic. Goldenballs, the video game, is utterly bereft of anything. You'd have more fun playing the DS without a cartridge. And if you play this instead of watching daytime television, you run the danger of making yourself sick for more days, and you'd have to call in to work and say, I can't come in, I've got a case of just having played the Goldenballs video game-itis. Sorry. Is it a contender for the worst video game of all time? I think it might be, as without the stakes or the money or the psychology, you're just choosing and opening spheres using your stylus. Goldenballs, more like mouldy bollocks.
Besieged! The outer rim planet of Utopia is being flooded with content attack ships due to the May 4th Accords set out by the Disney Empire. Attempts to find non-Skywalker related entertainment appear to be futile, with Jedi Padawan No-View Manchard entering the fray with 2 Clone Wars related games and his terrible intro.
Yes, sorry about that. Anyway, there were 2 Clone Wars related games on the Nintendo DS. What the bantha is the Clone Wars, though, aside from a throwaway line in 1977? Well, the Clone Wars was the name given to the huge galactic-wide conflict that occurred between Attack of the Clones
I don't like sand.
and Revenge of the Sith. which is probably the most important conflict in the entire Star Wars history that we never actually saw. It remained off screen for 5 years, except for Tarkovsky's high-octane and now non-canon short animations, and a handful of video games like Republic Commandos. That is, until George Lucas fancied another swelling of his bank account and his wallet pocket, and he teamed up with Dave Filoni, who had directed some very well-received episodes of Avatar: The Last Airbender. Filoni was hired as a supervising director on a new project, The Clone Wars. First impressions? Well, perhaps they were tainted by poor critical reception received by the prequels. They weren't overly positive. The project debuted with an animated movie in 2008, which was slated for its low-quality animation and annoying characters like Stinky and Zero the Hutt, not to mention the hitherto unmentioned Padawan of Anakin Skywalker, that being Ahsoka Tano. The midriff sporting Tortugan teenage pup was extremely grating to even the most apologetic of prequel defenders like me. The film was actually originally not planned to be a film at all, and instead it was a cash-in on the popularity of the franchise, and was actually just the first few episodes re-edited into a feature film presentation. From there followed the first series, which used the same animation, which worked better on the small screen, and was broadcast on the Cartoon Network later that year. And well, let's say it wasn't at its peak early on. The decision to spread around the warfare across the galaxy proved to be unpopular. Instead of focusing on protagonists familiar from the prequel movies like Anakin, Obi-Wan, Yoda, Mace Windu and Padme, viewers could often get side missions with less familiar Jedi like Kit Fisto, Luminara Unduli and Plo Koon. And even more baffling for viewers, the clones themselves. It's one thing to have a series following Obi-Wan Kenobi's early adventures, but it's quite another to have a series that focuses on characters who are by design literal clones of each other. But towards the end of the second series, something clicked. Adventures were getting more exciting, lore was being built, and background characters from the movies were being fleshed out. Even characters from the original trilogy were given outings, Chewbacca and Moff Tarkin having some notable cameos. The series became essential viewing and even acted as a companion piece to those maligned early 2000s prequels that in some ways improved those films. Sort of. The later episodes, like the Mortis trilogy, the Yoda Spirit Quest, which makes him realise the Jedi are doomed to fail, and most impressively of all, the revival of the series on Disney Plus that ran concurrently alongside the tragic fall of Anakin Skywalker at the end of Revenge of the Sith. Well, that's some of the best Star Wars stories ever written. Not only that, but the series has become extremely influential to the whole franchise. A lot of the lore and characters who debuted in the Star Wars series are prevalent not only in the Star Wars sequels, but shows like The Book of Boba Fett, Obi-Wan, Andor and The Mandalorian. It's had spin-off series also. Rebels and The Bad Batch are just as captivating as the Clone Wars later series. Ahsoka Tano, second only to Jar Jar Binks in the eye-rolling stakes after her debut, is now one of the series' most beloved characters and has her own live-action show. We've seen her grow up, and her creative father Dave Filoni is now absolutely integral to how the success of the entire Star Wars franchise, small screen and big screen alike. Incredibly, the Clone Wars even managed to redeem the character of Anakin Skywalker during the show, so much so that Hayden Christensen was welcomed back to live-action Star Wars without doing a shred of work or throwing an old Nazi down a hole in the Death Star. No longer was pre-Darth Vader Sky Guy a whiny brat, but a complex principle-driven character with a dangerous temper. In a franchise that has had more creative failures than successful ones, The Clone Wars is a shining example of doing Star Wars right. The series had 3 games based on it that emerged on the Nintendo DS, with the third title being a Lego game based on the first 2 series of the show. If you've played a Lego game, you'll know what Star Wars The Clone Wars is going to play like, so instead I'm going to concentrate on the more explicitly related titles, those being the LucasArts published Jedi Alliance and Republic Heroes. The first game released was Jedi Alliance, which came out in Christmas 2008. It was launched alongside a Wii game, Lightsaber Duels, with the two titles even cohabiting the same strategy guide. The storyline is centred around the Jedi investigating a space heist of some lightsaber kyber crystals by Count Dooku and the Separatists. He's been working with the villainous Night Sisters of Dathomir to swing the war in their favour. Using these crystals, and by Jove, Yoda's crew need to get this sorted lickety-split. You tackle the game's missions using different duos of Jedi Council members. The game makes full use of the DS touchscreen with a cast of different Jedi and at times other well-known characters dashing about in pairs, combining their abilities to great effect. Tapping on a battle droid will see your heroes launch into an automated acrobatic assault, but there is a way of executing combos dependent on how you mix up your high, mid and low attacks. The reward for this, as well as looking like a Flash Harry, is that you will boost your multiplier, which in turn boosts your attack damage. There are crates scattered around the environment and other damageable ephemera that contain various power-ups, and you'll need to swap between your laser monks in order to bypass some of the various obstacles and puzzles that will get in your way. You will need to use the Force to shift some of the objects, and that's attributed to the DS shoulder button. When you need to use the Force, you should see something glowing around you like a pregnant lady. Naturally, for a game heavy on the touchscreen play, there are all sorts of mini-games that make use of the feature, both in combat and interacting with the environment. You can carve your own lightsaber doorways in certain areas, and there are various control panels that you will need your stylus and your brain to get past. Jedi Alliance is dripping in effort and polish. The cast from the show are brought in to voice their characters, the sound effects and music are spot on, and the graphics are true to their animated origins and in their movement, as they're smooth like come off a gold tooth. These aesthetic attributes are at the higher end of DS performance. Gameplay, given its touchscreen control, is a little bit limited, as it's definitely a game that leans more towards its story. You're very much on rails, and short rails, as the game doesn't outstay its welcome. The presentation is definitely doing a lot of the carrying, like a Tauntaun on Hoth. However, I don't think it collapses and dies under that weight, so don't go splitting it open and using it as a sleeping bag.
I thought they smelled bad on the outside.
IGN found it to be one of the most ambitious and impressive action titles to hit the Nintendo's handheld in the whole of 2008. They praised the fun controls and amazing production values, and then they gave Jedi Alliance a whopping 8 out of 10 in December of that year. The follow-up, Star Wars The Clone Wars Republic Heroes, came out in October 2009 and was a more widespread release, not only appearing on the Nintendo DS, but Windows, Xbox 360, PSP, PlayStation 3, PlayStation 2 and Nintendo Wii as well. In this title, General Grievous is getting restless in his current position in the Separatist army as he seeks to impress Darth Sidious by making a power play. Just show him your legs, your shiny metal legs. Once again, we've got a two-man team-up as our heroes visit various exotic planets with one topological feature to right the wrong things General Grievous has caused. In this one, you get more action with the eponymous New Zealand accented clones as they join the fight named after them by laying down cover fire for both their same-faced buddies and Obi-Wan and his crew. They will blast away, hiding behind cover and firing charged megashots. Control is identical to that of the previous game, with most of the interaction occurring via the touchscreen and the shoulder buttons being used for force-related pushing and hoiking. Republic Heroes has a lot of similar quick-time events and mini-games from Jedi Alliance 2, so you'll be using the touchscreen to react to dramatic set-pieces and to solve puzzles. The touchscreen can be a little sticky when it comes to diving between cover rocks and manoeuvring about in general. What doesn't help is that compared to the last game, the game sometimes insists on zooming so far out that all the grandeur of the balletic Jedi Master carving through mass ranks of battle droids with lightsabers, well, that's reduced to tiny pixelated stick figures doing something unclear in the distance. The platforming doesn't feel as intuitive in this one either. It's almost entirely timing based, with the window of success being quite small, so your Jedi will often fall down a chasm. It's not heavily punished, so you'll just take a dent off your score multiplier, but it does feel a little bit frustrating. Maybe it's just me, but every element in the sequel just feels a bit lesser in this than Jedi Alliance, from the storyline to the graphics and indeed the overall polish. Perhaps it was down to the studio's focus being more broader when it comes to all the different formats, and the DS was an afterthought this time. Potentially. Still, if you enjoyed the gameplay in Jedi Alliance, this is more of the same, just not quite as good, like New Hope versus The Force Awakens. My sentiments were echoed by IGN, who reviewed the DS version of Republic Heroes in October 2009, where they gave it a mediocre 5.5 out of 10. They reckon that Republic Heroes is just not much fun. The platforming is frustrating and the combat is largely unexciting, save for a handful of fights. Republic Heroes is just not much fun at all. So there you go. In terms of quality, Jedi Alliance is as good as rolling around in a field with Natalie Portman, but Republic Heroes, well, it's the dialogue that accompanies it.
People and ask them to name a way of toasting someone. Michelle.
Over a fire.
If it's up there, I'll give you the money myself. Oh no!
Are you fortunate? Do you have a family? Then Vernon Kay wants to talk to you. Here we are then, with a video game based on a TV institution. It's an absolute staple of ITV's scheduling, but one with a very surprisingly low amount of video games. Other than a clutch of DVD games and a Les Dennis starring CD-ROM effort, there hasn't been anything in the way of one of Britain's best-loved light entertainment shows getting a video game. How did Ocean, Alternative Software and High-Tech turn this away back in the 8-bit era? What has Paul Daniels' Every Second Counts got, Bob Monkhouse's Family Fortunes hasn't? Oh, and yes, I'm very aware that Family Feud, the American version of the show, has a long history of video games. But why not Family Fortunes? Is there an answer to this question? Well, probably not, but maybe if we look at the show and this here Nintendo DS video game, maybe we'll get an answer from Vernon Kay with that bum fudge eating Bolton grin of his.
Bolton, Reebok football, Bolton Stadium!
So was Family Fortunes yet another British idea that got imported to the States? No. America's Family Feud was the first iteration of the show, debuting in 1974, with the UK version coming to ITV in 1980. Worldwide, Family Feud has iterations in over 50 countries. Wow, oh wow, hasn't it done well? The first host was legendary one-liner merchant Bob Monkhouse, and he was responsible for the name change, as he felt Family Feud sounded a bit too aggressive, so changed the title to Family Fortunes. Bob essentially stopped all hopes of the UK version of the show becoming a death sport, the absolute bastard. Bob's tenure as the man holding the cards would last until 1983, where he would be replaced by coloured toothbrush enthusiast Max Bygraves. He himself would stick it out for 2 years before Mavis from Corrie impersonator Les Dennis nested down and made it his home for a solid 15 years. The show, unfortunately, towards the end of his tenure, was going through a rough patch, certainly by the early 2000s, and so Captain Dennis abandoned the sinking ship as it sunk to the ignominy of the ITV daytime scheduling. The unknown presenter Andy Collins, me neither, was holding on to its hand as it withered and died in a metaphorical hospital bed in 2002. But then, like a mighty phoenix from the flame, it rose again with a Z-list celebrity sheen in 2006, with gurning northern everyman and star of this here video game Vernon Kay presiding over the tomfoolery of the minor personalities and their gathered brood of non-entities. From a personal point of view and an editorial note here, I am not a fan of the celebrity culture that took over television for much of the 2000s, 2010s and to the present day. I always feel that these game shows work better with the host as the main personality of the show and the people genuinely trying to win something to make their lives better, even in minor ways. It gives it more of an edge, doesn't it? I mean, these celebrities could just give money to charity or do some sort of fundraiser. And it's all good until you run out of actual celebrities that want to do these things. And they did with all these shows very quickly. Now all you get is an endless stream of laboratory-grown celebrities that just appear to do these shows and are famous for doing these shows. Your Joey Essexes and your cast of Love Island. People famous for being famous. Anyway, new host Gino D'Acampo has brought back with him the non-careerist non-entities, you know, the ones without the bleached teeth and arseholes, and the show is better for it. The game show aspect works like this. Some producer wrangles 100-odd goofballs off of the street and asks them questions like, name a substance that can melt away the flesh from a human skeleton, or name a device for stealing a meerkat from a safari park. The answers from these questions are then compiled and then fed into this Computatron, which in its old format was called Mr. Babbage. The contestants then must identify what the most popular answers would be from the mouth-breathing morons that represent our general populace, with the intention of clearing the board before the other family on the other side of the studio floor there gets a chance to steal with just one answer. The family who has won the most rounds then goes on to enter the big money round. In this round, the aim of the game is to score the most big answers, with the aim being to notch up 200 points. 2 family members are given a short amount of time to fire back quick-fire responses, one after the other. Can our loving famalam take home a haul of luxury goods and a wallet full of mullah by getting to that 200 point mark? It's very exciting stuff I'm sure you probably won't agree with. How does this DS entry from 2009 compare to the show, and should we be concerned that it was released by Mindscape, given they were responsible for Goldenballs? Now, if you weren't here for that, I gave that game a right old kicking not so long ago, decrying it as perhaps one of the worst games in history, an unsung legend from the very sewer of video games past. Even more concerning is it's by exactly the same development team, that being Slam Productions. I've got the fear, mummy. Well, it's not quite as bad as Goldenballs, don't worry, though that's admittedly the faintest of praise. Graphically, there's clear similarities between this and the Goldenballs game. The avatar of Vernon Kay is just as dead-eyed as Jasper Carrot's soulless digital husk. The contestants are a bunch of quirky weirdos using a graphic style a couple of notches up from that Dire Straits Money for Nothing video. If you don't like the look of the families on offer, and boy, why would you, there's an option to edit 2 of the families and replace them with a custom family. You're given a pared down version of the Me editor on the Nintendo Wii for this, so you can make your own family of disappointing people that you have to interact with in real life. Or if you fancy, a much better idealised family of handsome, attractive people. Or you could do what I did and do, quite frankly, something that shows me as a person of very poor character. You can choose a couple of different game modes. A short version of the game is available, which basically eliminates one of the families, and then you've got the full version of the game that uses 2 teams, with both versions mirroring the same round format of that TV show. Its point of interaction is perhaps the biggest sticking point, and it's worth us looking at the TV show on why that is. You see, in the TV show, finding correct answers is really only part of the reason for its longevity. The show's strength comes from not its quiz aspect, but more its entertainment. And its entertainment comes from how dumb some of the answers are from the contestants and the general public. On the spur of the moment, people can come out with the most bizarre things. As Les Dennis used to say, if it's up there, I'll give you the money myself. In the DS game, you're given a list of stock answers. Sure, you could tap one of its red herrings, but you've not really thought of that, so it's not really that funny. Perhaps this is why there hasn't been a game based on family fortunes before, apart from obviously that CD-ROM one. There's a list of right answers and not many, if any, wrong answers. As such, it's not really a quiz, is it? Sure, there's more game in this than there was in Goldenballs, which was literally just selecting balls. And that's perhaps why this game is better than that one. But despite even that handicap, the handicap of the limitations of the quiz itself, it could and has been done better. If you look at the older Family Feud games on things like the NES and the Mega Drive, you had to enter your answer using an in-game keyboard, where you'd obviously move your cursor around and select the answers, one letter at a time. You weren't selecting just from a small list, so the scope was much larger. Weirdly, it feels a bit arse about face, this, doesn't it? I mean, a list would work better on those older games, given the input methods available. The DS not only has a touchscreen, but a larger memory to store more answer variants, should you be one of the sorts who finds spelling a little bit difficult. That would make more sense, wouldn't it? Plus, I think with that method, you could then perhaps have a bit where you can make your own questions up too and store them in the game's memory. Just think of the possibilities. You could get a relative to answer questions like, food stuff that makes Uncle Keith fill his colostomy bag much quicker, or men from the flat roof pub round the corner that have slept with your sister. Limitless-ish potential. It's difficult to say that this DS game represents a missed opportunity though, as I'm not sure it has. The popular evergreen format has shown here why we didn't get British versions of the Family Feud games, or versions made by UK software houses in the 8 and 16-bit era. It's really a light entertainment programme, not a quiz. But why did we get Family Feud games in America? Well, I don't know really, but exist they do, and even though there's an Americanised tilt to their questions and answers, I would say that they probably are better versions of the idea if you really have to play a Family Fortunes game. Yes, very disappointing. If Vernon Kay turned to you and said, we asked 100 people what they'd do with a copy of DS Family Fortunes, I suspect playing it wouldn't feature, or at least be further down the list than take it back to the shop, trade it in at CEX, or use it to fill space in the kitchen bin. Do any reviews exist from 2009 on this game? I think it is completely fair to say that the OK magazine takes a sizable proportion of the blame for the inevitable, not to mention fairly soon, extinction of mankind. That probably sounds incredibly hyperbolic and slightly defamatory, but let me lay down some truth bombs upon your soul, my brother. OK Magazine was a pioneer of the era of celebrity culture and a herald of a bleak future, a planet shorn of all life. I have travelled from the future to tell you this. Celebrity-focused magazines existed before, but it was usually tied in with whatever professional thing that the celebrity was doing, whether they be attending premieres for their movies, they were talking about their new fashion range, maybe they were hawking the sounds of whatever they had committed to vinyl disc with the sound of the air emerging from their lungs. Is it pleasant? Sometimes. Now, celebrity gossip and tittle-tattle existed separately from this thanks to the tabloid media. We knew what Burt Reynolds had been up to and which starlets had run their fingers through his wiry chest hair on his torso, but he didn't want us to know that any more than Cindy Crawford wanted photos of her knicker gusset as she emerged from a taxi underneath the Daily Star's headline banner on newsstands from Stranraer to Stevenage. OK Magazine introduced a new aspect to this. It enabled celebrities for a fee to show the general public their personal lives, to show them round their marbled homes, to see them propped up against their Ferraris, to even invite their fans to their weddings, albeit a month late and only in pictorial form. OK Magazine is the leader of the pack, the elder of the tittle-tattle tribe. Oft imitated, equally matched by other magazines, I guess. Celebrity culture is vacuous and an absolute miserable state of affairs. It is, to me, end of civilization stuff. It has to be the point where alien scientists will come upon this husk of a planet and they will look upon the late 90s and beyond and go, what on earth is this nonsense? You see, it's no longer that you have to have something about you. You don't have to be able to sing, to act, or even look incredible. Being famous is no longer a side effect or a side hustle, if you will, either good or bad. It's increasingly becoming the end goal. Love Island contestants are sprinkled liberally across the collective mind circus on every black screen across the land. The Kardashians have dominated planet Earth in a way that their Star Trek namesakes could never have even dreamed of, mainly by looking identical to each other and courting Hollywood's glitterati. You can make a career daisy-chaining appearances on terrible identikit TV shows together, and no one will remember where you originally come from or what your talent actually is. It's a body of work that's so ugly it resembles an old cadaver floating down a dingy city canal. Is this old man screaming at the clouds kind of behaviour? It absolutely is. But it isn't celebrity culture itself that is world-ending. The culture of celebrity has got to the point where it's so bad that we're now putting them into places of governmental importance. We're all conditioned now. All that matters is fame. It doesn't matter your substance, it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter what you do. It only matters that you're famous. And we all aspire to be famous, but not all of us can be famous. And yet, it seems to me that a lot of us who shouldn't be famous are famous. It's a conundrum in itself. And OK Magazine and its ilk stand at the beginning of this fire with matches in hand. It is they who are pleading Rylan to show us his stall in his gilded lavatory. Let's have an 18-page pullout of your pulled-out tampon, Miley Cyrus. Is this what you wanted for us, OK Magazine? Are you happy with what you've done? Are you? Look at what you've done to this world, OK Magazine. You absolute bastards. OK Magazine was first published in the United Kingdom in 1993, concerning itself with the lives and loves of various celebrities and royals, and it proved to be very popular. Surprisingly, the demographic is fairly mixed, as you can see from this here graph by Statisia, published in 2020. Do you like graphs? That's a graphy graph. OK Magazine was so popular that it became the world's most popular celebrity lifestyle magazine, with more than 30 million readers across the planet. 20 different countries have it on their newsstands, and it's not places where you'd necessarily think. There are places like Bulgaria, Mongolia and Latvia. Do they have special editions for Latvia? I don't know why I'm asking you, I should have researched this better. But let's pretend that they do have their own version in Latvia, and that they had, like, I don't know, an 8-page pullout on Igor Stepanov's wedding in the Latvian version, and that he had lions and clowns and elephants and stuff there, and they ate, I don't know, a suckling pig or something. Yes, if you were vaguely famous, even stroked by a distant feather of fame, and had a wedding in the offing, then you could monetize the happiest day of your life with OK Magazine by signing over the coverage rights to your nuptials. And people would apparently pay to read about it. I mean, I don't even like talking about weddings that I've been to, let alone paying money to read about people's weddings when I don't even know them or their guests. It's a different world. I'll never understand. But OK Magazine was not without its controversy. The magazine had a particularly dodgy 2009, for instance. In March of that year, OK published an official tribute issue to cancer-stricken Big Brother contestant Jade Goody, complete with captions such as "In Loving Memory" and 1981 to 2009. Nothing out of the ordinary really with that. A publication rather crassly trying to make money from the death of one of their most featured stars is perhaps not great, but unfortunately they published that while she was still alive. In June, they paid an opportunistic ghoul $500,000 to use a picture of Michael Jackson's corpse being transported from his home to an ambulance outside on their cover, which is, to me, levels of ick that will never be washable off. Anyway, OK Magazine had a game on the DS, and it's a title that made the most of the broadened appeal of the Nintendo machine's hardware. As discussed ages ago in the Russell Grant's Astrology and Alan Carr's Stop Smoking episode, the brain training game and the easy stylus control had brought fresh eyes to gaming, and there were plenty of brands and titles that looked to harness this mass market penetration. Misses. The title was published by Ubisoft and released exclusively in the UK and Ireland. Aren't we lucky? Cheshire-based coders Team 3 Games had formed with the DS and applications on it, with software based on Doctor Who Top Trumps, an organiser called Diary Girl, and the 3-title Puzzle World franchise in their back catalogue. There is a sort of pseudo-story behind this too, believe it or not. You've been made the new editor-in-chief of OK Magazine, and you're tasked with getting the next 12 periodicals onto newsagents' shelves. This will be achieved by completing 20 different puzzles per issue, with 5 puzzles unlocking a new part of the latest edition's cover. All puzzles must be completed to finish the issue and move on to the next magazine, because, it would be a bit slapdash to put a unfinished magazine onto a newsagent's shelf. The puzzles are a mixture of brain teaser types with a lean towards the kind of fare that you would actually find in the last few pages of your typical OK Magazine. You know what I'm talking about. Spot the difference, word searches, crossword puzzles. There's even an appearance by Christopher Lee's Star Wars character's wife. Sudoku. Thank you. After each puzzle is completed, you're rewarded with a card with the choice of 3 stars to rub off. Misses. Don't worry, you're not offering happy endings to Coronation Street actors. It's a scratch card. Behind each star is a series of different quantities of points. These points can be traded in on any of the puzzles for hints if you get really stuck, or if you're absolutely awful at Sudoku like I am. None of the puzzles should be that taxing, even if you're as bad at Sudoku as I am. And the game offers plenty of points to trade in for hints if you end up droolingly baffled by the riddles presented to you. Presentation-wise, it's unspectacular. Celebrity photos do crop up, but sparingly, and you'll spend much of the game staring at grids. To be honest, for the type of application this game is trying to emulate, it's probably better that it doesn't look too flashy. An initial problem you may struggle with is figuring out how the game likes you to write. It doesn't interpret the finished image of your handwriting so much as the order of the strokes that you've made. Often you'll end up with the DS being unable to pass what the letter B is, for instance, or you'll be halfway through writing an E and it'll just go, "See, right you are, governor, I see it is, I'm going to put that into the puzzle for you." It's all very erasable and you can fix it, but it can be a little bit frustrating. There is a neat feature where you can teach the program how you write letters and numbers, but it's very time consuming, so it's almost better to just learn how the game likes you to write characters rather than the other way around. 240 puzzles are on offer here, which sounds fairly decent, doesn't it? Though probably not when compared with the bumper compendiums you can buy at your local The Works store, for instance. That said, if you've got an interest in late 2000s era celebrities, you're planning on a relaxing sunbathing holiday when you're not going to be moving very much, and you have a habit of losing pens and books, then boy has this game got you covered. It's specifically made for you. It says Ron Seal as a seal called Ronald. It does exactly what it sets out to do, which is further the decline of the Western civilization via the medium of celebrity culture puzzles. I'm still blaming you, OK Magazine, for all of this. You'll even get celebrity facts as the game saves. That's nice, isn't it? Oh, and it did teach me what a drindle is. It is a dress. The only review I could find from this of the time is from old crazy person worrying Newsmith's The Daily Express, who took time out from their daily articles about Maddie and Princess Diana and Snowmageddon to tell us that they reckon that fans of OK Magazine will jump at the chance to put themselves in the driving seat and create their own version of the magazine, while puzzle fans will be impressed with the choice of brain teasers. This is an easy and enjoyable game for celebrity gossip gurus and puzzle fans alike. Nicholas Warburt's, the guy who reviewed it, may well have gone a little bit overboard though, as he awarded it a 5 out of 5 in April 2010. New Super Mario Bros? Pah! Castlevania Dawn of Sorrow? Move over, Drax. Phoenix Wright? Don't let the door hit you, Buster. We all know that OK Puzzle Stars is the real deal on the Nintendo DS, don't we? Thank you for being a friend, sitting through all that old shite again. Yes, thanks for watching the compilation, and I'll see you soon. Like, subscribe, and thanks, bye.